Good evening. Today is Monday, April 6, 2015. We're here for the purpose of the regular meeting of the Elmhurst City Council. I would ask that you all rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Clerk Spencer, I'd ask that you call the roll.
Gutenkopf.
Here.
Deuter.
Here.
Dunn.
Here.
Leader.
Here.
Volumsky.
Here.
Graham.
Here.
Toledo.
Here.
York.
Here.
Levin.
Here.
Healy's absent. Honquist.
Here.
Kennedy.
Here.
Mulliner.
Here.
Wagner.
Here.
13 present, 1 absent.
13 present, 1 absent. We have a quorum. On to written communication from the public. At this time, is there anybody who has any written communication that they would like to submit to the council? Please raise your hand if you have any written communication. Anyone else? Mr. Kremer, you have written communication you'd like to submit. Please bring it up to Clerk Spencer.
Thank you.
Anyone else with any written communication? Seeing none, we'll go on to public forum. Public forum is a portion of our meeting where any member of the audience has an opportunity to address the city council on any topic they so choose. We ask, out of respect for other folks that want to speak and out of respect for the work that we have to get completed this evening, that you keep your comments to 3 minutes. When you are called, we ask that you come to the microphone, identify yourself, and addresses are optional. Clerk Spencer, at this time, is there anybody who has signed up for public comment?
Yes, we'll start with Kevin Calkins, 174 West Van Buren.
I'm sorry, that one over there next to Chief Ruth.
First time mayor, excuse me.
If you could start with your name.
Good evening. My name is Kevin Calkins. I'm a resident of Elmhurst since 1975. I'm also a Vietnam veteran, and that's what brings me here tonight. 2015 marks the 50th anniversary of the start of the Vietnam War. The first infusion of American combat troops was in 1965, 50 years ago. The Vietnam War was a long one. I was there in 68 and 69. I was fortunate. I got to come home. Over 58,000 brothers and sisters did not get to come home. 13 young men from the town of Elmhurst gave their lives in Vietnam. I propose that we should, I would like to see a memorial put up somewhere in Elmhurst at a park or a public place. Usually it's a stone with the 13 names engraved. I would like the city council to consider this proposal. I'm sure there's funding involved. I have a bunch of veteran groups and private groups that would help out. I'm just trying to get it rolling here. And if you don't mind, I know I only have 3 minutes. Would you mind if I read the 13 names of the Elmhurst residents who died in Vietnam?
Be honored.
Thank you. Private First Class Arthur Schneider. Private First Class Thomas Jerome Leston. Private Stephen John Churchill. Lance Corporal Larry Ray Palmer. First Lieutenant John Henry Curtin. PFC James Thomas Cummings Jr. Corporal David Ronald Burks Jr. Staff Sergeant Lawrence Carroll Rose. First Lieutenant Stephen Robert Major. Corporal Kenneth Irwin Steinable. PFC David Edward Schulz. First Lieutenant Richard Didakis Krupa. And Captain John Vincent Francis. I would like a memorial, and I think it would make it difficult to send people into battle again if they'd seen it. And I'd like it even more then Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Calkins, and thank you for your service. Clerk Spencer?
Claude Pagash, 566 West Gladys.
Claude Pagach, 566 West Gladys. I'd like to talk a little bit about Hahn since it's going to be on discussion this evening. Personally, I think it's nothing but a black hole. Not only this council, but councils before it and mayors before have spent endless tax dollars buying property that nobody else would buy. We sat on it and turned it into a parking lot, and it's probably the only thing we've ever earned money off of. Now we got an agreement supposedly with some people. This is the second time up the bat for them. They didn't do much for us the first time, and I doubt if they'll do much for us the second time. The millions spent for property that winds up as a parking lot hasn't done much for the citizens of this town. Hasn't solved flooding, hasn't repaired streets. And now we got an agreement the size of a telephone directory, and I'm assured, without reading it, that the public, the residents of this town will not benefit. And even if it is built, I will see nothing from it in the next 20 years. More than likely, if the stores go in, you guys will turn around and give them the sales tax out of it. I don't know what attracts people to this town that are developers that never have any money, because they sure like to take it away from the public. You did it with the parking garage. You did it with the condos. You guaranteed them a profit. And I hate to see what you're going to give to Hahn, because it isn't going to do me any good if I just got to pay for what somebody else wants. And 20 years from now, with all the changes in building codes and zoning codes, the public that may be here, because I definitely probably won't be, and look at the pile of rubble. City tells me they're worried about $2 million they may lose from the state, but they're willing to spend almost $2 million to clean up the site that supposedly we're going to sell to the developer. And when are we going to do that? After maybe $15 million tied up in that land, what are we going to get out of it?
Mr. Pagash, I'd ask you to wrap up your comments.
Probably not even what it's worth.
Tracy Fletcher, 736 South Washington.
Hi, Tracy Fleischer, 736 South Washington. I'm here tonight to ask you to move forward with the home buyout proposal that the Public Works Committee will be presenting to you. I understand that the main purpose is to serve the greater good. It will serve an additional purpose and provide extreme relief to homeowners in ways that you will never be able to imagine. I have been told by 3 separate realtors in the last several months that my home is unsellable as a family home. A beautiful home in a desirable neighborhood, it is now unsellable. Not because of a bad housing market or the quality of the home or even a poor school district. Realtors will not list my home because of flooding and the street I live on. This is a problem that I've personally faced for nearly 5 years, with no solid timetable for any type of fix. The only way to move my family and my 3 children to a street in a home that will stay dry is to sell it to a builder for a roughly $100,000 loss as a teardown. We are not in the position to lose that kind of money. My first floor takes on water. We cannot add sump pumps or glass block windows to solve this problem. If the home buyout program is approved, my name will be one of the first submitted. While my home may never score high enough or meet the buyout criteria, some very lucky family will. I want nothing more than for residents to stop living in fear of flooding. Even if it's only 3 families per year with this program, That's more than some will ever get. Thank you.
Michael Cremery.
Michael Cremery, 570 West Crockett. Actually going to talk about signs that are permitted. Signs permitted in any district without permit or fee, Section 22256I, political signs. Such signs shall be located entirely on private property pursuant to the owner's consent. So are residents supposed to honestly believe that no one in this chamber saw any of the signs that are on government property, public right-of-way, outside this building? Another issue that we have is, appears to be that we actually have utility poles on private property in front of the Starbucks on North Avenue and west of Route 83, because there's a political sign there right in front of a utility pole, and the utility pole must be on private property. That would be the only logical explanation of why the political sign would be there, is because the political sign would be on private property. So there must be an issue with the telephone pole. If you guys can address that, that would be appreciated.
That's all that's signed in tonight, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, that's it for everyone who signed in this evening. Is there anybody in the audience at this time who did not have an opportunity to sign in on our sign-in sheet that wishes to address the council? If so, please raise your hand. Seeing none, we'll move on. That concludes public forum. On to announcements. Any announcements from the dais? Clerk Spencer?
Thank you, Mayor. Tomorrow, April 7th, is Election Day, our consolidated election. The polls will open at 6 a.m. and close at 7 p.m. If you need more information, don't know your polling place, you can go to DuPageCounty.org/election or call 630-407-5600. Thank you.
Alderman Mulliner.
Just kind of a reminder to the public that the police department has a prescription drop-off for the medicines, if you have any leftover medicines. Last year, they collected about 800 pounds of medicine. If you bring the medicine over in a plastic bag, would be best zipped. Do not bring the bottles because they don't want the bottles, so just get the medicine over there. There is a drop-off there that's available for anybody who wants to drop off.
Okay, any other announcements from the dais? Seeing none, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Agenda item 6. At this time, does any alderman have any item currently listed on the consent agenda they would like removed to either vote no or provide additional comment? If so, please raise your hand. Alderman Bram.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. 3 items, 618, 6.22, 6.24.
618, 6.22, 6.24. Is that correct?
Correct, sir.
Okay, Alderman Gutenkopf?
It was covered.
Anyone else at this time, anything they'd like to have removed from the consent agenda? Seeing none, I will now entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda minus item 6.18, item 6.22, and item 6.24. Motion to approve consent agenda minus those items. Alderman Deuter with the motion. Alderman York with a second. Clerk Spencer.
Deuter.
Aye.
Dunn. Oh, excuse me. York.
Aye.
Thank you. Levin.
Aye.
Healy is absent. Honquist.
Aye.
Kennedy.
Aye.
Mulliner.
Aye.
Wagner.
Aye.
Gutenkopf.
Aye.
Dunn.
Aye.
Leader.
Aye.
Polumsky.
Aye.
Graham.
Aye.
Toledo.
Aye.
13 ayes, 0 nays, 1 absent.
13 ayes, 0 nays, motion carries. Consent agenda is approved, minus item 6.18, 6.22, and 6.24. 6.18 is an ordinance. Clerk Spencer, I'd ask that you read the ordinance.
MCO-06-215, an ordinance amending Chapter 16 entitled Garbage and Rubbish of the Municipal Code of Ordinances of the City of Elmhurst, Illinois.
Okay, to put this before the council, I'll ask for a motion to approve the ordinance as read and submitted. Motion by Alderman Kennedy, second by Alderman Bram. Alderman Kennedy, this is a result of a report out of your committee. Do you wish to opine?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No further comments. I'll defer to Alderman Bram, who pulled.
Okay, Alderman Bram, you pulled this. What say you?
Thank you. I just wanted to reiterate my stance from 3 weeks ago. Last time we talked about this, I believe, at the council level. I think this is a disservice to the seniors to essentially raise the 65-gallon refuse more so than the 96-gallon refuse toter cost. I cannot support this like I did not support it when the report was before us. I once again think that the seniors are the ones who are really paying the price here from the standpoint of we transitioned to a refuse contract that did not allow them to continue with a 32-gallon size can. We forced it, being the only two options, a 65 or a 95-gallon, and now we're just proportionately raising the rates from 65 relative to the 95-gallon. So I hope others do not support this as well. I do not.
Okay, any other comments? Seeing none, I'll ask Clerk Spencer to please call a roll.
Kenneth,
Aye.
Bram,
No?
Toledo,
Aye.
York,
Aye.
Levin,
Aye.
Healy, absent, Honquist,
Aye.
Mullener,
Aye.
Wagner,
Aye.
Gutenkopf,
Aye.
Deuter,
Aye.
Dunn,
Aye.
Leader,
Aye.
Palumski.
Aye.
That's 12 ayes, 1 nays, 1 absent.
12 ayes, 1 nay, motion carries. Agenda item 6.18 is approved. On to agenda item 6.22. Clerk Spencer, I'd ask that you read the ordinance.
MCO-10-2015, an ordinance to amend paragraph DD entitled Referral of Matters to Committee of Section 2.06 entitled Council Rules of Order of Chapter 2 entitled City Council, and to amend paragraph HH entitled Reports of Committees of Section 2.06 entitled Council Rules of Order, Chapter 2 entitled City Council of the Municipal Code of Ordinance of the City of Elmhurst, Illinois.
Okay, to put this before the council, I'll entertain a motion to approve the ordinance as read and submitted. Motion by Alderman York, second by Alderman Dunn. Alderman York, this, I believe, came out of your committee. Any comments?
Thank you, Your Honor. No, this is the ordinance resulting from the report that was passed a couple weeks ago.
Okay. Alderman Bram, I believe you pulled this.
Yes, sir. I was going to let someone else go first, but thank you. Yeah, it's the same comments, kind of like the garbage one we just spoke about, as in 3 weeks ago, I believe, or maybe this one was a little bit longer last time we discussed it. I don't know on what makes it special to have 2 aldermen be consensus that warrants any suggestion by an alderman or a resident to move forward to a referral process. I think this is actually, in a way, stifling suggestions moving forward. We all have disagreements. We all always don't agree on the same idea, but I strongly believe that every single idea, no matter if it's 1 or 14, needs to have discussion and should be vetted by the city council. That's the pledge we took when we swore in as aldermen, that we will serve our residents. And I don't care if it's 1 alderman, 1 resident, or all 44,014 aldermen. I think those ideas should move forward and be discussed and voted upon by the full city council. The other piece of this recommendation or report is about starting fresh, I guess I've heard it be said, every 2 years upon election, wiping the slate clean. Just because the state of Illinois does it, I guess the city of Elmhurst needs to do the same thing. As I said 3 weeks ago, I believe that this is a disservice from a perspective of it doesn't show the true nature of an idea and how long it's languished. In the future, I hope that they don't languish, but we have current referrals that are, I don't know, 3, 4 years old, something, 6 years old. And I think that no matter when the referral is submitted, that it should remain on the pending items list, especially because the only answer I received last time we debated this topic was it's starting fresh, it's a clean slate, and therefore if that idea isn't valid anymore, it won't be there anymore. Well, to me, that doesn't make any sense. If the idea is not valid, the respective alderman should pull that referral off. And then the other response was along the lines of, I forgot what the other response was, so I will just move on. So it was the same stance as last time. I don't support this. I think that in the 14 years that I've been up here, the policy that we follow today of having referrals by any amount of aldermen, by not doing a clean slate, has worked perfectly. There's never been an issue. There's never been a complaint by any elected official until at this point, which I really, at least from my perspective, haven't heard any justification for this revision, and therefore I haven't heard any complaints from any residents, so I do not support this.
Okay, any other comments? Alderman Gutenkopf.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm struck by somewhat arbitrary nature of the decision that referrals not acted upon by the committee to which it was assigned shall expire by April 30th of the odd-numbered year. I understand this is intended to line up with the election, but the really critical point that we haven't addressed here is that nowhere in this ordinance, nowhere in the committee report, did we identify an incentive to encourage committee chairs to take up referrals, nor did we add any actual teeth that would be used to keep the chair from sitting on something he doesn't like. And we've clearly seen that committee chairs have done this for 6 years, for the longest sitting referral that I know of, the referral that just happens to be about transparency in government, making sure we know who we're doing business with, the one that we can't seem to, despite the fact that the committee's discussed it many times, they can't seem to issue a report about it. So rather than address the real issue, which is that we as a city have not got any tools to encourage referrals to be heard within the time frame, we take the easy way out. Let's just drop them after 2 years, and then we don't have to think about it anymore. So I can't support this ordinance, just like I couldn't support the committee report, because I think we've taken the absolute wrong tool, the wrong way to go, the opposite of what we should be doing if we believed in good government. Thank you.
Any other comments? Clerk Spencer, I ask you to call the roll.
York.
Aye.
Dunn.
Aye.
Problem with that. Leader.
Aye.
Palumski.
Aye.
Graham.
Nope.
Toledo.
Aye.
Levin.
Aye.
Healy's absent. Honquist.
Aye.
Kennedy.
Aye.
Mulliner.
Aye.
Wagner.
Yes.
Gutenkopf.
No.
Deuter.
Aye.
Everybody. Okay, 11 ayes, 2 nays, 1 absent.
11 ayes, 2 nays, motion carries. Agenda item 6.22 is approved. On to agenda item 6.24. Clerk Spencer, I'd ask that you read the ordinance.
ZO-03-2015, an ordinance granting variations for the property commonly known as 236 North Route 83, Elmhurst, Illinois, 60126. Do I need to read the PIN? You want me to read the PIN numbers?
I think we got
The
it covered.
property.
No,
Okay.
I think we're okay. Thanks.
Thank you.
I'll entertain a motion to approve the ordinance as read and submitted. Motion by Alderman Levin, second by Alderman Palumski. Alderman Levin, this is an ordinance based on a report of your committee. Do you wish to comment?
No, it's
Okay.
deferred to Alderman Graham.
Alderman Bram, I believe you pulled this.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I spoke to this and had some concerns and outstanding questions when it was a report. Upon my due diligence of following up with city staff, I received some answers when it comes to the topic of stormwater. I know these variances as in regards to parking, as well as, I don't know, the right-of-way or the front yard variance as well. But a key component to this, albeit not discussed and albeit I don't even believe it was mentioned in the report, is this is a property in the floodplain, therefore they're adding a ton, not literally a ton, figuratively, a lot of fill to prevent this property when it was redeveloped to be out of the floodplain. From the information I received, this would not trigger stormwater detention, mandatory stormwater detention. The proposed site will add 14,000 square feet of hard surface to the existing site. And again, from what I've been told from city staff, more than 25,000 square feet of hard surface must be added to an existing site in order to trigger detention requirements, and therefore that's why it's not a mandatory requirement. There is some storage being proposed, some best management practices being proposed on this site, but the concern is this. The concern is that 2.3 acre feet of compensatory storage will be required due to the filling of the floodplain on the existing site. The request has been from the developer that the entire 2.3 acre feet be allowed to be used out of the available remaining 4.0 acre feet allotted for the Eldridge Park Reservoir. Now again, I understand this is the variances, but the variances allow for the development. The development triggers what could be a stormwater management issue for the city of Elmhurst, and I think we all know that we have some stormwater management issues here. Upon a lot of discussion over email as well as a phone call today, I had issue with the city of Elmhurst using their credits for free, no charge to the developer, to allow for this site to be developed and not get any kind of compensation for it, either from stormwater compensation or from monetary compensation. But where I came to a crossroads is this. The other developments in this location on the, what is that? The southwest corner of 83 and North Avenue. The developments that have already occurred, being the bank, being the strip mall with the Starbucks and whatever else is in there as well, also were allocated some of these credits in the past at no compensation, no monetary compensation. So although I strongly believe that in this instance and going forward, we should have some type of monetary compensation because these credits could be utilized elsewhere in town, be it the southwest portion of town or elsewhere. But since we've already established the precedent of the other two developments, I'm actually going to agree with this and move forward, but I want to call attention to the need for a policy change that we should not be, what I would consider, giving away these credits to any developer without fair compensation to allow for a development to happen. The reason for pulling it was to highlight that fact, to highlight the need for a policy change. I know that's not going to be discussed or voted on tonight, but it definitely needs to be done, and only because precedent was set of 2 out of the current 3 developments. The Shell station did not request any credits to be allocated to them, therefore they did not receive any. But the other 2 developments that are already in existence did request it, and the city of Elmhurst granted them, so I cannot stop that precedence at this one development and hold them accountable. So that is my comments for this. I don't have any problems with the reduction in parking or the other variances, but I do have issue and cause for great concern to me in regards to managing the credits we already have at Eldridge, because they could potentially be used elsewhere. And if we allocate them to any developer, we should get fair compensation. Thank you.
Okay, Alderman Palumski.
Thank you. I have a question for the chair. A discussion about credits. What committee would handle that, about this type of credit?
I'll get back to you. It'd either be DP&Z or Public Works with stormwater. All right, any other comments? Seeing none, I'll ask Clerk Spencer to call a roll.
Levin.
Aye.
Palumski.
Aye.
Graham.
Aye.
Ludo.
Aye.
York.
Aye.
Healy's absent. Honquist.
Aye.
Kennedy.
Aye.
Mullenor.
Aye.
Wagner.
Yes.
Gudenkauf.
Aye.
Deuter.
Aye.
Dunn.
Aye.
Leader.
Aye.
13 ayes, 0 nays, 1 absent.
13 ayes, 0 nays, motion carries. Agenda item 6.24 is approved. That's it for items that were pulled off the consent agenda onto committee reports. Agenda item 7. 7.1, a report. Clerk Spencer, I'd ask that you read the recommendation.
It is therefore the recommendation of the Public Works and Buildings Committee that the above-described flood-prone property prioritization and buyout plan policy be adopted. Signed by Jim Kennedy, Chairman, Chris Healy, Vice Chairman, Michael J. Bram, and Diane Gutengoff.
Okay, I would ask for a motion to approve the recommendation and report as submitted, to put this before the council. Motion by Alderman Kennedy, second by Alderman Bram. Alderman Kennedy, report out of your committee.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Committee spent a lot of time, probably the better part of about 2.5 months, looking through this policy. And this is really a follow-up to what we did as a council to allocate money in the 2015 budget for buyouts of $1 million. And so, just very briefly, this puts together a voluntary program whereby residents in flood-prone areas can come to city staff, basically raise their hand and put themselves into consideration for a potential buyout. We've put together a prioritization matrix, a criteria to score each home uniquely based on its flooding history, its location as it relates to potential projects, and ultimately that'll give us a way to prioritize things so that when we've got that group together and city staff has done their work, we can begin to get back to residents potentially and talk to them about a potential buyout. In terms of the value, we were very careful not to put anything too constraining because each situation is going to be somewhat unique, but we're going to look ultimately at an appraisal of a property and its EAV to serve as a starting point for a discussion of a purchase. And so unless any other questions exist, I'll stop now and let others comment. Thank you.
Your comments as it relates to the report before us. Seeing none, I'll ask Clerk Spencer to please call the roll.
Kennedy.
Aye.
Bram.
Aye.
Toledo.
Aye.
York.
Aye.
Levin.
Aye.
Healy, absent. Honquist.
Aye.
Mullenor.
Aye.
Wagner.
Aye.
Gutenkauf.
Aye.
Deuter.
Aye.
Dunn.
Aye.
Leader.
Aye.
Palumski.
Aye.
13 ayes, 0 nays, 1 absent.
13 ayes, 0 nays, motion passes. Report 7.1 is approved. Under Report 7.2, Clerk Spencer, I'd ask you to read the recommendation.
Therefore, the Development Planning and Zoning Committee recommends that the City Council approve the City of Elmhurst Strategic Communications Plan as presented. Signed by Scott M. Levin, Chairman, Danny Palumski, Vice Chairman, Mark A. Mullenor, Alderman, 7th Ward.
Okay, to bring this to discussion, I will entertain a motion to approve the recommendation and report. Motion by Alderman Levin, second by Alderman Palumski. Alderman Levin, this is a report out of your committee.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For quite some time, there's been discussion amongst council members of ways to improve communications throughout the city, both with the residents, amongst each other, incorporating new technologies. And for quite some time, there's been discussion about having a communications officer that would do that as a full-time position. Dan Leahy was hired and stepped right into the position, and I'm very pleased that within a relatively short amount of time, he has developed a plan that he presented to DPZ that talks about the priorities of communication and the different ways that ties into the city's mission. This report was presented to the committee on 3 occasions. I thought it was a good discussion in terms of enhancing some of the ideas that he presented, and I'm very pleased that this is the report and the plan that comes out of the committee, and we submit it for the council's consideration.
Okay. Alderman Palomsky?
Thank you. I want to thank Communications Manager Dan Leahy for the work on this. It's a long time coming, and I'm glad that we have it. It looks like a great starting point, a great framework, and I expect it to guide how we reach all of our stakeholders and exactly help us define what we're communicating. Not only do I expect to see the objectives of this document met, but I also believe that there will be new initiatives evolving from it. It may additionally serve to complement other future plans. I'd like to draw your attention to page 4, target audiences. This wasn't included from the start, but we felt that it was important to define our reach, and of particular importance is the segment, or the important addition is the segment on the commercial sector outside of Elmhurst, and that's efforts geared to enhance business recruitment, to make that a marketing priority. And I think we've got a lot of potential there. And overall, any efforts driven by this communications plan, I think, will serve to benefit all of us.
Okay, any other comments? Clerk Spencer, please call the roll.
Levin.
Aye.
Palomsky.
Aye.
Graham.
Aye.
Toledo.
Aye.
York.
Aye.
Healy, absent. Honquist.
Aye.
Kennedy.
Aye.
Mulliner.
Aye.
Wagner.
Aye.
Gutenkopf.
Aye.
Deuter.
Aye.
Dunn.
Aye.
Leader.
Aye.
13 ayes, 0 nays, 1 absent.
13 ayes, 0 nays, motion passes. Report 7.2 is approved. On to agenda item 7.3. Clerk Spencer, I'd ask you to read the recommendation.
Therefore, it is the recommendation of the Development, Planning, and Zoning Committee that the City Council authorize the city attorney to prepare the proper documents for the approval of the redevelopment agreement with Morningside Han LLC for the construction of 192-unit luxury apartment complex, which includes 12,000 square feet of retail space, 150 public parking spaces, a civic plaza, a stormwater detention. Signed by Scott M. Levin, Chairman, Danny Palomsky, Vice Chairman, Mark A. Mulliner, Alderman, Ward 7.
Okay, to put this before the council, I will entertain a motion to approve the report and recommendation as read. Motion by Alderman Levin, second by Alderman Palomsky. Alderman Levin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is kind of like doing a book report on War and Peace, so I'll try to condense what has been a very long and complex project and tell you how I think we got to the RDA that's before us. I think somewhat of an overview is warranted in view of the complexity and time span that this project has traversed. The city began purchasing properties for this project back in 2001, and all in all, I think the total properties purchased were probably somewhere in the order of $10 million, what they were worth then, but maybe not necessarily what they would be worth today after the recession. The RFP that first went out, I will call it, I'll combine the first two into one, was in the late 2006, early 2007 timeframe, and in July of 2008, there was an agreement or a plan to move forward with 103 condominiums and 15,000 square feet of retail space. And as I say, that all happened before the Great Recession hit. The financing for the project dried up, and there was no project to go forward. The city council, the original contract was terminated. The city council did its due diligence. It was a full council effort. We talked with, we had some consultants, and it was determined that we would once again go out to RFP, but it was pretty clear that the condominium market wasn't going to be there anymore. In 2013, the RFPs went out. Morningside was again selected as a developer in January of 2014, and that really is, after a lot of effort by the council and hearing numerous proposals and having it narrowed down to the finalists, that really set the stage for the beginning of the negotiation of the redevelopment agreement. Under it, as the council knows, we are building 192 luxury apartments. a total of 480 parking spaces, 330 are private, 150 are public parking spaces. There are 12,000 square feet of retail and a 10,000 square foot civic plaza, in addition to a stormwater vault that will help mitigate our stormwater problems. The RDA negotiation process was complex. You have before you a 137-page legal document that is including the exhibits. Although we had reached a deal on the overall format, there were a great many fine points that had to be negotiated after the project left the council when we last saw it. And I would give very special thanks to our city attorney, and in particular, Mr. Peppers and Mr. Kopp, our assistant city manager, who went into some very detailed and tough negotiations from both sides to get a deal that both sides can live with. There's a TIF incentive here. The original TIF request, when it went out, was for $2.47 million. That number included $475,000 for environmental cleanup. And I want to point out that I regard that $475,000 as a placeholder. As a seller, it is our responsibility to deliver the property clean. That's what we've intended to do. The actual cleanup costs weren't known. I noted that the other developers, for instance, Lincoln, who was the second or the first runner-up, included a $315,000 placeholder with an asterisk plus whatever costs were required above that. The actual cleanup costs are much more significant. They're approximately $1.3 million. It was determined that some of the contamination from a dry cleaner or other uses on the property had spread beyond the borders of the property, some of it going to adjoining properties, some of it going under the right-of-way. And so the cleanup is significantly more, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. So the actual TIF amount under this agreement, which you'll find in section 5.1, is $2.215 million. And that is detailed in there in terms of its uses. The demolition, site preparation, erosion control are not to exceed $500,000. Professional design and legal services related to public improvements not to exceed $175,000. Public utility relocation and stormwater detention, $375,000. Public roadway improvements, $175,000. Construction of the Civic Plaza, $700,000. I want to point out that this TIF money is almost exclusively, if not exclusively, used to pay for public improvements related to the project. In any negotiation, there are changes, and in this case is no different. There were some changes to the original budget that I would like to point out. There is a $60,000 item that relates to improvements on surrounding land. For instance, on the Panera side, moving the dumpster storage ways to the back, putting in a walkway for the public to use, and a railing to protect the public from any traffic. There's also a similar walkway set to go on the south side of the project near the Shell station. There's a $20,000 alley improvement so that the parking deck will be level with the alley, which was something that was not determined to be a need until after the project left our hands at the council. There was a negotiated $65,000 increase in demolition costs paid to the developer. And there's also, and I'll describe this in a little more detail, a change in the parking plan for which we are going to pay an additional $128,000, which is part of the 2.215 TIF number I mentioned before. Originally, as the plan or as the project began, there was always determined that we would own the 150 parking spaces. It was always determined that the developer would maintain them, but in the negotiations it became apparent that We had a different idea of how they would be maintained. We found through our own analysis that it would be cheaper if the city maintained those spaces, our spaces ourselves. That would have a cost to the developer. We determined that the cost that would have been charged to us would have been about $30,000 a year. We can do it for about $15,000. That saves us $15,000 a year, so the payback for that $128,000 is in about 8.5 years. And we also believe we have a better maintenance program because ours is geared more towards high-volume parking, where the developers might have been geared more towards the owner/parker. The city's TIF investment, or I should say the city's investment, and I think we have to remember that this property was rolled from TIF 1 into TIF 4, but as a TIF 4 investment, the original plan was that the Pauley acquisition would be $1.8 million. It turned out to be $1.77 million, so there was a $30,000 savings there. The utility relocation was anticipated to be $650,000, and it has come in at $450,000, so we've reduced that by $200,000. The permits, $410,000, stay the same. The TIF, when you exclude the environmental cleanup, as I described before, originally was going to be $2.47 million. It's now $2.215 million for a change of $255,000. We anticipated spending $100,000 in lease terminations, and we did them for $50,000, so $50,000 was saved there. When we subtract the environmental cost and add in the alley improvement that I mentioned, we are still at the original total we expected, which is $4.955 million. The original or the actual, the numbers have shifted around in category, but the total remains the same. I want to highlight a couple of other features of the agreement. One is environmental remediation. As I mentioned before, we will pay the cleanup cost to obtain an no further remediation or NFR letter. As I said, the estimated cost for remediation are $1.311 million. The city, and as these numbers went up, and we wanted to verify that the developer's numbers were, in fact, the higher number that we were being told, we engaged DAI Environmental to act as our advocate during the application, and we will continue, and remediation process will continue, and they will continue to work with us to make sure that the remediation is done in the most cost-effective manner, because it will tie into the costs that might come back to us at the end, as I will describe. Once the NFR letter is received, the city will have no further environmental responsibilities for that property whatsoever, other than any environmental problems that would be underneath the public roadway. So I feel that that's a good result. I should have mentioned that one of the components that is in section 5.3 that's important here is the developer is paying the city $1.675 million as originally intended to purchase the property, and for that they are agreeing to construct the project as we've described it. Upon substantial completion of the project, the city will reconvey to us the first floor parking area, our 150 parking spaces, the Civic Plaza, and the stormwater vault. Section 8.1B places important restrictions on the developer that it will not protest their property taxes. They're identified in Exhibit J in terms of what levels of revenues have to be there, so that we are not going to be in a situation where there's an appeal that lowers the tax base upon which we do our TIF calculations. The final project costs, I guess I want to explain it this way. We have the potential to share in the profitability of this project in two ways. The first one is when the final project is done, there's a certification of what the actual budget turns out to be, and that budget is attached to the Exhibit G to the agreement. All the costs will be verified, and we will look at each dollar of construction and we will compare it to the costs in Exhibit G. For every dollar that's saved above those construction costs, the city and the developer will share 50-50 in all of those savings. So there's an incentive for everyone to do the project as cost efficiently as possible. A second revenue-sharing avenue is based on the internal rate of return achieved by this project. If you look at section 19.2, if there's a internal up to 11%, the whole return goes to the developer. Between an 11 and 12% of return, it goes 10% goes to the city, 12 and 13% of return goes 20% goes to the city, 13 and 14% of return, the city gets 30%, and any internal rate of return above 14%, the city gets 40%. And it's at each level, so we get 10% of what's between 11 and 12, and sort of kind of waterfalls down. I will honestly say this is probably one of the more complex components of it, and I was glad at our committee meeting to have some professional guidance in terms of, to know that we've had consultants that look at it to determine that the way that this is calculated is appropriate. This profit sharing, if you will occur when a capital event occurs. And a capital event is described here as either when the project is sold, when the project is refinanced, if the project converts to a condominium project, then 2 years after that date, or in any event by December 31st, 2014, essentially 8 years down the road, we will look at what the rate of return has been, and the city will share in any of those profits. Now, I do want to point out there is a cap on what we can get back. That is, we share up to, the cap is limited to $5,928,000 in round numbers, and that is broken down. That number is derived from our TIF incentive of $2.215 million, our environmental cleanup of $1.311 million, $450 we're spending for the utility relocation, the $410,000 permit fees, and a formulaic portion of what we paid for Pauli, which turns out to be $1.542 million. The report actually is off by about $38,000 in the city's favor. I do not believe that, and that's because I think the calculation was done with the original $650,000 utility relocation costs in the calculation. Mr. Kopp tells me we've spoken with the developer and that will be corrected. I do not believe that we have to do an amendment to the report. It would just be an amendment in the final agreement. It's a complex project, and I'm trying to give you the overview. I think it's, I could say on the non-number side, it's been a long time coming. Whatever we paid for the property before doesn't really matter now. We've made the best decisions possible as this council was presented with the numbers that we faced, the proposals that were given to us, and I think that the agreement that has been negotiated on the city's half is favorable, fair, and I think an important exhibit, if you didn't dig through it all, is Exhibit C, which says that there is a certain dates by which things have to be done, but in reality, I'm told that we're forgetting default dates, but realistically, by December 31st of 2016, we could see substantial completion after a project that started so many years ago. That's what I have to present today, and try to answer any questions, perhaps with the assistance of Mr. Kopp and Mr. Peppers.
Very good. Anyone else want to jump in? Guess we're done.
Sir, of course.
Alderman Bram.
At first, and I typically don't do this, but Alderman Levin, that was an excellent, I'll call it a synopsis of the project. It is a long time coming. I guess I'm one of the few that are still around from the beginning of this development, and I'm glad that we're getting close to shovel-ready for this development. It's one of the questions that always consistently gets asked anytime you run into someone at the grocery store is what's going on with Hahn Street? When is that going to be redeveloped? So I'm glad we're here. But I'm going to voice the same concerns that I've had all along on this project, and I try to consistently do when it comes to minding the dollars and cents of the Elmhurst residents as a whole. I'm concerned of the request from the developer on this project of the total TIF incentives, and Alderman Levin made a good points in regards to what came from TIF 1, what came from TIF 4, you know, how does the cleanup cost figure into everything. But to me, and here's where I respectfully disagree, to me it does matter on how much we paid for the assemblage of the properties and what we as the City of Elmhurst residents are getting out of it. If I just look at the cost to assemble these properties, other than Pauli, or maybe it's including Pauli, of approximately $9.45 million. And we're getting out of it essentially 150 parking spaces. You know, I don't want to go back too far back in history, but when this was originally proposed, we had more retail space being proposed, which now that's down to 13,000 square feet. I don't recall exactly how much parking, if it was plus or minus. But if you do the calculation of 150 parking spaces costing the City of Elmhurst residents close to $9.5 million, that's roughly $63,000 a parking space. That's a lot to me. And that's not including all the other costs that were mentioned, and all the other costs pretty much coming out of the new TIF, TIF 4, which this piece of property was just relocated into TIF 4. And those other costs are the right-of-ways, you know, Hahn Street right-of-way, the alley right-of-way, et cetera, utility relocation. And Alderman Levin did a good job of pretty much walking through this list. Permit fees totally being waived. Variances that might not seem to have a cost, but obviously brings additional economic dollars to the developer as a whole. And I'm not going to go on and on with other easements, et cetera. But my point being is that this is way too expensive at the cost of the taxpayers. We talk about TIF funds and how TIF funds, well, it doesn't matter, it's in the TIF. We can utilize TIF funds. We have a lot of projects that could utilize TIF funds. And I always say, and I know others have said in the past, about smart development. So I'm pro-development, but I'm pro-smart development. But I don't want to give away the kitchen sink. And I believe $63,000 a parking space, unless they're gold-plated, are very, very expensive parking spaces, and that's giving away the kitchen sink. So that's my biggest sticking point here. I've got over the fact that we have given the variance of building taller than code allows. Again, that's an economic benefit. I've passed the point of how dense it is. I still have the concerns over traffic. I still have the concerns of how quick or if this will ever be filled by apartment dwellers. I still have the concerns over the smaller retail space. But the biggest sticking point today is the dollars. And the dollars, to me, don't make sense. I'm not including the 2 point and change, 2.1 to 2.5, whatever you want to say, of the additional dollars out of TIF 4. Just out of TIF 1, roughly $9.5 million, we're talking $63,000 a parking space. Here on the dais, we have said in the past, a parking space should cost $15,000 to $25,000, depending on if it's surface or if it's a parking garage. Here, we're tripling it, and we're satisfied with it. I'm not satisfied with it, and that's the only reason today, pushing aside all my other concerns with traffic and density and height, because that's already passed, that's already moved forward. Dollars matter, and $63,000 per parking space makes me not support this. Thank you.
Alderman Gutenkauf.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My questions basically center around the stormwater public improvements, because the agreement briefly mentions stormwater in a list of public improvements, talks a little bit about reimbursement for it, but doesn't go into any detail about how much stormwater detention we're going to require. We really haven't addressed that, and I had hoped that the development agreement would get into more detail about stormwater. So I'd like to know a little bit more about what the committee was thinking and what direction they're expecting it to go.
Alderman Levin, would you care to add some detail to that?
I would like to ask the mayor's, or the chair's indulgence to ask Mr. Kopp if he could respond to that question.
Can I get a consensus, nod of heads from the council, allow Mr. Kopp to address this? Okay, Mr. Kopp, who has been our lead on city staff for the past year or so. Mr. Kopp, the question is, as we all are concerned with stormwater, I'm going to
Borrow microphone.
Treasurer Leibowitz's microphone. Stormwater is a concern for all of us, and how does that play a factor in this current development?
If you notice today, there was an addition to the Exhibit B, which was the civil drawings. The civil drawings show that it's about a 0.19 acre feet of storage. Our discussions with engineering, because it is a totally impervious surface now, that the stormwater really isn't required, this is above what the requirement would be.
Okay. Alderman Gutenkopf?
It doesn't strike me as very much. I know one of the things we as a council have said that we wanted to do is to improve properties as we have the opportunity to develop them. We've used the TIF as part of our argument, that this gives us an opportunity to exert some leverage to improve stormwater storage. This is not much water detention on this property, and I recognize that the county regulations don't come into play given the size of the development, but we seem to have missed an opportunity to make this a real priority. Is there a reason why it couldn't have been any larger?
Would you clarify, Alderman Gutenkopf? I didn't hear the end of your comment there.
That I'm wondering why it couldn't have been larger. How did this work into the negotiation? It just seems like it's kind of a toss-off. Here's a little stormwater storage for you, and we could have done better.
Mr. Kopp?
Now, the way it worked out is because of the building footprint on the lot, that under the Civic Plaza, the whole area under the Civic Plaza is stormwater. There's also some best management practices, and there's a water clarifying device in there that will clean the stormwater before it goes into the storm sewers. But it's covering the entire Civic Plaza without needing pump evacuation, and that was the maximum that could be put in that area.
Okay. Any other comments as it relates to this report out of DP&Z? Alderman Bram.
Yeah, just for further clarification on that, since this is only under the Civic Plaza, that means it is owned and built, I assume, by the city of Elmhurst dollars for the stormwater management. So I want to make sure it's clear and the press understands that this isn't being delivered by the developer to the city of Elmhurst. This is part of the city of Elmhurst participation of adding stormwater detention to a project, because we're purchasing that property by an $11 million price tag and other benefits of permit fees, waiving, et cetera. So I've just read before that this is part of the Hahn Street project, which to me, I walk away with hearing that comment, that this is provided by the developer and part of the agreement, but it's actually provided by the city of Elmhurst for the city of Elmhurst residents, and we're paying for it, just like we're paying an exorbitant amount, in my opinion, for parking that we already have on this location. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Alderman Levin.
When we issued the RFP in 2013, we went into the private market and we solicited proposals for all those who would like to come forward and do a development. And none of those people who came forward really cared how much we paid for the land, because it's only worth what it was worth when they made their proposals. Everyone's property took a hit after the Great Recession, and that's why I say what's before us is the approval of an RDA that's based upon what the entire council approved of in terms of selecting what we, the city council, felt was the best proposal. So there was never any hope, not even a glimmer of hope, that there was going to be $10 million paid for this land. None of the proposals came even close. And that's because in the market today, it's not worth that. So to compare what we're doing from, and I understand, you can buy property and you can take a loss. Never happened to me, but it's happened to those I've known. So, but that's not what's before us today. What's before us today is an RDA based upon proposals that we accepted and negotiated from January of 2013 and then in January of 2014 when this project was selected. So we are getting, I think the cost per space is actually between $18 and $22 a space. At 150 spaces, at the average, that's $3 million worth of parking, a $700,000 plaza, a $100,000 vault, property that's improved, that's been sitting there virtually useless for many, many years. As I say, I wasn't on the council when it got stymied the first time and the condos didn't take off, but I'm here now, and I'm very glad to see it moving forward. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments? Alderman Dunn.
I'd have to agree with Alderman Levin. I am very glad to see this document before the City Council tonight to begin to move forward with this Hahn Street project. It's been 15 months since the award or the selection of Morningside back in January of 2014 when the council made the final selection, 9 votes for Morningside and 4 for Lincoln. It was clear what the preference was, even though Morningside was a less positive or beneficial project economically, and also it was 1 story higher. It was a 6-story project as opposed to a 5-story project. But we do have a good project, I think, in front of us. It's a $57 million project. It's about the same as it was in the original proposal. In the cost breakout, the city is putting in $3.5 million of the financing. There's about $19 million in equity and about $35 million in debt. This particular agreement, I think, does a good job of sharing costs, risk, resources, and benefit equitably. We are investing some money in that, in this particular project, but we have an idle parcel or many parcels of land that have been underperforming for many years, and this project's going to be very good for the downtown area and as we go up North York. So I am excited to see this before the council tonight. It has been a long time coming. As Alderman Levin said, it's a very complex agreement. There were certainly some unknowns throughout the project, especially in terms of environmental remediation. That particular cost went up significantly, but I would support the agreement moving forward. And I think one other thing I do want to mention is the timeline on it, where it's expected, based on the agreement, that the first people would be moving into first residents would be moving into the facility end of the year in 2017, based on the timeline, and then significant occupancy about 4 months later, maybe in the springtime of 2018. So it's a long ways off, but it is a big project, and I think my timeline is correct there. It's going to take a while, but we have a good project moving forward. Thank you.
Anyone who hasn't had an opportunity to speak yet, wish to jump in? Okay, any final comments? Alderman Bram?
Thank you. I agree with Alderman Dunn's points, as I stated earlier, that I too am happy to see this move forward. I too am happy to see a profit-sharing agreement. I don't know if the city of Elmhurst has ever seen the benefits of this profit-sharing agreements in the past, but I too am glad to see that worked in the agreement. My only sticking point, and that's the only reason why I can't support this, is, and we can squabble over the dollars on what is the appropriate amount for the dollars per parking space. Should we take the full 9.5 or Alderman Levin's calculation? Is that the appropriate? I feel it's somewhere in between. I feel that, you know, the amount of land assemblage and the cost, if you agree or disagree, the cost of it to the city of Elmhurst residents took out of their pockets, directly or indirectly, is still true of $9.5 million on top of the additional, whatever, 2 to 2.5 million. So that's the bottom line for me, and that's why I can't support this. And in all due respect, an accusation of making a statement for someone who was not here to say that this project was stymied, I, as one of the aldermen who was here, takes great offense to that. It is definitely an accusation at best. I think that the full city council who surround this dais today, as well as in years past, has always done their best to move this project forward. And I don't appreciate, and I take that as a direct disrespect of making a statement that this project was ever stymied at any particular time. I think everybody wants to see it move forward, including myself, no matter what my vote is tonight, because I cannot wait to see some activity there, as well as some additional retail space there.
Okay, any other comments? I'll ask Clerk Spencer to please call the roll.
Levin.
Aye.
Palumski.
Aye.
Graham.
No.
Ludo.
Aye.
York.
Aye.
Healy, absent. Honquist.
Aye.
Kennedy.
Aye.
Mulliner.
Aye.
Wagner.
Yes.
Gutenkopf.
Yes.
Pardon me? Yes. Aye.
Aye.
That was a yes.
Deuter.
Aye.
Dunn.
Aye.
Leader.
Aye.
12 ayes, 1 nay, 1 absent.
12 ayes, 1 nay, motion carries. Report 7.3, Han Street redevelopment agreement is approved. It will be before us in an ordinance, full contract, 2 weeks from now. As council's aware, I typically do not opine, but votes over, I would like to say that I'm very happy that this is moving forward. I appreciate the hard work of Nick Peppers and also Strasburg and the Morningside crew. But from a staff point of view, I'd be remiss if I did not single out Assistant City Manager Kopp, who has done an unbelievable amount of work on this to get it to this point. I truly appreciate your hard work on this, Mr. Kopp. I do think that ultimately, whatever it was, 16 months ago, whenever we started this, notwithstanding environmental, which I thought Alderman Levin pointed out very well, is something that was incumbent on us to clean up regardless. If you take those numbers out from what was originally approved by the alderman and the city council 16 months ago to now, the numbers are virtually identical. There's actually a benefit to the city of about $60,000. So even with markets changing and you know, raw materials, et cetera, and everything going up and down, I think it's a credit to everyone involved that we were able to stick to the original vision that was voted on 16 months ago. So really appreciate that. Thanks again, Mr. Kopp. On to agenda item 8, reports and recommendations of appointed and elected officials. A couple from the mayor, 8.1. Election days tomorrow. Clerk Spencer already mentioned that. Elmhurst College is holding, I had it pulled up, but I think I shut it down. Elmhurst College is holding their 8th annual governmental forum. It's going to be including our very own Senator Mark Kirk. That is on Thursday at 11:30. If you poke around on the Elmhurst College website, you can find tickets. I'm sure tickets are still available at $40 a piece. One One other thing that continues to be kind of a conversation, in fact, I know that City Manager Grabowski attended a meeting that I was unavailable for this afternoon with the governor, is dollars as it relates to revenue coming into Elmhurst. I think I've discussed in the past about the local government distributive fund and how potentially one of the proposals being floated out there is a reduction of that at 50%. That's $2 million shortfall to the city of Elmhurst. There's really two different budget deficits or budget issues Springfield is facing right now. Last year, believe it or not, this might not surprise some folks, last year Springfield approved a budget that had a $1.6 billion hole in it. I think that was the intent, that potentially that if the governor remained the governor, he would be able to increase revenue after the election. Well, that didn't happen. So now the current Springfield group is faced with a $1.6 billion budget deficit. So they're really faced with two issues. One is the current budget deficit for this year, and one is how do they address the ongoing deficits. One of the other things that we found out recently, yesterday? Today. Our motor fuel tax for 1 month will be cut in half. Much like the local government distributive fund, the taxes go down to Springfield. We like to get them back, but we need to get their approval. Springfield is going to hold on to half of 1 month's revenue of our motor fuel tax to cover that some of that $1.6 billion gap that they're facing. That's about $40,000 to the city of Elmhurst that we taxed for, anticipated would come back, and it is not. So we are keeping a very close eye on Springfield as they continue to deal with their budget woes. Alderman Levin.
Is that $40,000 delayed or $40,000 lost?
$40,000 we will not be getting.
Thank you, Mayor.
Alderman Bram.
Yes, I would just like to make a recommendation. This is very good and vital information. If we could really have a press release on this information, if it has not already been done. I haven't seen it come across my desk yet, but I think it'd be great for the public to hear about this and understand, because that will eventually impact future decisions.
It does, and we'll continue to do that, and that's part of what we've talked to Mr. Leahy about. We did the LGDF press release last week, and this one just came to us today, so I'm announcing it, and it'll definitely be disseminated.
Thank you.
That's it for my report. City Manager Grabowski.
Thank you. As the mayor mentioned, I did attend a meeting today at DuPage Mayor and Managers where Governor Rauner attended, and it was essentially the board of DMMC that was with him and was able to ask some questions. We spent probably 45 minutes with him. He also handed out a document that will get out to the city council tomorrow, more on what his agenda is. And when pressed with timing of when his bills would come out, if you recall at the college, the breakfast, president's breakfast, he mentioned that he'd like to get 6 bills passed. He still does not have a timing on that. He's obviously looking at strategy is what he said. But we will get the document out to the city council so you have an idea of what he's looking at now. A couple other items that I have. At next week's DPZ committee meeting, there will be presentations from the 2 groups that submitted RFPs for the Addison parking lot. We put a release out on that today, that if anybody wants to come and hear that, they will be presenting for approximately 10.
Just to clarify, this is the surface lots.
The surface lot on Addison that we put out for RFP approximately a month and a half ago. That's 138 and 142 North Addison. We received 2 proposals. Each presentation is expected to be about 10 minutes in length. The DPZ committee will make those proposals available after that meeting. And then on April 27th, we'll continue that discussion and welcome public comment at that time. One other item, excuse me. You may have seen the release that we sent out, but we're going to have some filming in town, possibly this week, depending on the weather. Chicago Fire, the TV show, will be filming at the quarry, and because of that, there will be some traffic detours on West Avenue, and that's what I really want to stress to everybody, is the detours on West Avenue. They're going to have a rehearsal on Tuesday, which will shut down 1 lane, and that's in the afternoon. And then on Thursday, they plan to be there all day with a closure from 6 a.m. till 7 p.m. And if there is weather that threatens that, they'll move that to Monday the 13th. That's what I have. Thank you.
Okay. Any other reports? Alderman Palomsky.
Thank you, Mayor. The Sustainability Task Force has been formed and is charged with creating a sustainability plan. We've been gathering information about city operations, and we're ready to seek input from residents. I would like to invite everyone to attend the Sustainability Plan Public Workshop on April 22nd, which is Earth Day, 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. here in council chambers. This is an informal workshop with a small working group format, and we're seeking feedback, suggestions, and ideas, focusing on the following areas: energy, transportation, waste, water, which could be conservation, quality, stormwater management, and land use. All are welcome. Thanks.
Okay, any other reports? Bob Dunn. Oh. Alderman Dunn.
Yes, sorry, I should have mentioned this under announcements, but you mentioned Elmhurst College, and it made me think of their annual recycling extravaganza, which is coming up on April 18th, less than 2 weeks from today. It's in their large parking lot on Alexander, and it's going from 9 a.m. in the morning till noon. Again, that's April 18th, Saturday morning. Thanks.
Okay, any other reports? Seeing none, we'll go to other business. Any other business? I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Alderman Mulliner, second by Alderman York. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you, everybody.